Upgrade Albo. What a world of pain he is in tonight. He may have gone into media hiding today. Well, I'll give you the tip. This thing is a world of pain and the story changes by the hour. You know the heart of this is not just too close a relationship between Anthony Albanese and the former CEO of Qantas, but of course an over-reliance of the relationship and what free stuff, i.e. upgrades, can come the way of the now Prime Minister, but in this case, more importantly, former Transport Minister. Now, remember, we told you last night in chapter and verse that the issue is not whether he picked up the phone and spoke to Joyce directly or texted him or sent smoke signals or sent carrier pigeons, whether he spoke to the cleaner or he got his cleaner to talk to Joyce's cleaner. The point is the Ministerial Code of Conduct couldn't be clearer, which is that you cannot ask for gifts, and tens of thousands of dollars worth of upgrades would well and truly be that. Well, tonight, major news at skynews.com.au as the Prime Minister tries to kick up some dust here. Remember, it's about him asking for the upgrades. But the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese's office, has released a cryptic message to the media denying that he called. Now, remember yesterday in his press conference, he sort of was, well, maybe, but that he never called the Qantas CEO. He danced around all of this yesterday in a series of press conferences, and a spokesperson for the Prime Minister has now publicly denied the question outright about whether or not Mr Albanese had called the former airline's boss. However, I'm reading from sckynews.com.au here. The cryptic message failed to confirm whether Albanese had used other forms of communication to solicit free upgrades from Mr Joyce or whether his office had made representations to the then Qantas CEO. The statement we got: the Prime Minister did not ever call Alan Joyce seeking an upgrade. You see, the Prime Minister's office think, therefore he's off the hook because he did not directly contact the CEO. Well, we'll wait and see. The claims of the book, which presumably have gone through all of the lawyers, suggest that there was direct contact. All travel has been appropriately declared and matter of the public record. Now, there's a problem here because the Prime Minister wants the story to be about who contacted who. No. I repeat. It is about him contacting Qantas at all at a time when he was the Transport Minister. It also comes on top of more stories about more upgrades. Again, skynews.com.au. Make it your homepage. They're right on top of all of this. Now, they add to the claims that have already been discussed via this book of 5 different examples of him putting his hand out for the upgrade, that being 2009 from Sydney to Los Angeles, return. In April of 2010, from Sydney to Rome, return. A trip apparently to Europe in 2011, from Honolulu in the United States to Sydney in December 2012, and a trip to Dubai in March of 2013. Again, while they want it to be about who called who, it ain't about that. Did he ask in any way, shape or form for the upgrade? Did he ask Joyce directly? Did he ask the cleaner? Did he send a smoke signal? If he asked for it, then he's in breach of at least one of those 2 sections of the Ministerial Code of Conduct that we showed you last night. The simple question for the Prime Minister that he will have to answer next week in Parliament is, do you believe that ministers should abide by the Ministerial Code of Conduct, yes or no? Would you sack a minister should they breach the Ministerial Code of Conduct, yes or no? Would accepting gifts from the biggest company in the area that you have responsibility for be a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct, yes or no? Would you seeking gifts from the biggest company in the ministerial area that you had responsibility be a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct, yes or no? Again, whack that Ministerial Code of Conduct up because people talk about it. I want you to know the words. Section 3.18. Ministers, in their official capacity, may therefore accept customary official gifts, hospitalities, token of appreciation, but must not seek or encourage any form of gift in their personal capacity. Well, we've got 5 examples of them that are in the book, a couple more via the reporting of Andrew Clennell and others here at Sky News. Then there's the second bit, which is section 3.21 of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. The same words, same meaning when he was working as a minister for Rudd and as a minister for Gillard. Ministers must not seek or accept any kind of benefit or valuable consideration either for themselves or others in connection with performing or not performing any element of their official duties as a minister. You can't get, let alone ask, gifts from the biggest company in the area of which you supposedly have responsibility. So I mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 examples of him doing it, him being caught red-handed. He wants to make it about who contacted who. No. He got them, which puts him in breach of 3.21, but also, I would suggest, 3.18, which is that you must not seek or encourage these things becomes the issue. Again, Andrew Clennell, or rather I should say Cam Redden, with a bit more detail here about other upgrades on top of the 5.
We can reveal that the Prime Minister on one flight in January the 20th, 1999, received an upgrade on a flight from Christchurch to Sydney. That is the first one. That was from economy to business class. Also received an upgrade from economy to business return from Sydney to Hong Kong in April of 1999. You can see that one on your screen. That's a Qantas flight as well. In February of 2000, Mr Albanese and his then wife Carmel Tebbit received upgrades from economy to business for 2 Qantas flights for what is cited in the declaration as a family holiday to Thailand. And then in September of 2000, Mr Albanese declares a number of flights, 3 of them in total for himself and Miss Tebbit. These are one upgrade from economy to business flying on Qantas from Sydney to Singapore, an upgrade from economy to first class on a British Airways flight from Singapore to London, should be the next one, and then an upgrade from economy to business class as well, flying on a Qantas flight from London to Sydney.
Now, all of that exercise, apart from showing he's got a sweet tooth for this stuff, the stuff in opposition doesn't matter, right? It's all about whether he's a minister, hence the main 5 allegations which come out of the book. Prime Minister tries to distract with who asked who. Reality is, if it was asked for at all, in any way, shape or form, to anyone in the organisation, on his behalf or directly, bang, he's on the wrong side of this. He would have to sack his own Transport Minister for doing it, and presumably he can't go back to the time machine when it comes to the former Prime Ministers, but he's going to be on the wrong side of this thing. Again, Albo lets himself off the hook, but people need to understand the double standard. They need to understand that if his own Transport Minister did this, he would be compelled to sack them. But when he did it, he's going to say there's nothing to see here. Again, interesting to note some of the reviews of the Prime Minister's defence here, this sort of smoke bomb strategy of pretending it's all down to the word call versus text versus carrier pigeon versus, message in the mail or good vibes in the air. Sydney Morning Herald, upgrade Albo. The attack against his critics just makes it worse. This was an example of that garbage from yesterday. Did you call Alan Joyce personally for these upgrades?
Look, the idea, Qantas have a number in terms of bookings that are private bookings. In terms of the only discussions that I can recall with Alan Joyce, certainly we discussed, not through calls, we discussed the first flight from Australia to Dubai on an A380.
So again, Prime Minister's Office wants to make it all about calls. Section 3.18, he's on the wrong side of it 5 times. 3.21, he's on the wrong side of it 5 times. His ministers were out there trying to push it uphill today.
I think the Prime Minister has gone out of his way multiple occasions this week to answer questions about this issue.
If people have got allegations to make about this, we would invite them to make those allegations, but he has otherwise accounted for himself properly.
The Prime Minister has complied with all of the rules that have been in place for many, many years.
These people, if there's any allegation to make the allegation. Yeah, it's in the book. It's been in the press conferences. We've read the examples of how he's on the wrong side of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. I'll get to the National Corruption Commission in a second here, but a little taste of public opinion via the Daily Telegraph's website in the past couple of days. Unsurprisingly, things may well be within the rules, but it's the pub test that ends up counting. Now, Bronwyn Bishop's on the show tonight, and inevitably there'll be an attempt to talk about her situation. Remember, she was entitled when it came to the use of the helicopter, but because the pub test was invoked, she, of course, had to give up her job as the Speaker. The same pub test applies to the Prime Minister. Number of people that have been filling out an online survey, the Daily Telegraph's website, 10,467. 95% say the Prime Minister calling the boss of Qantas for an upgrade to pass the pub test. Again, don't get caught on this whole call, not call business. Did he ask Qantas, not whom at Qantas? Meantime, social media comments. He has to go, says one commentator, while another described Albanese as not only Australia's worst Prime Minister, but also its most accident-prone. It's time for Albo to go, to call an election now. We don't need any more of this Labor Greens rubbish. Did he tell anyone that he grew up in Housing Commission flat? He's certainly making up for lost time. My favourite, Darren. This is not the spirit of Australia. And then remember, part of the connection between the Prime Minister and Qantas, specifically its former leadership, was the decision to deny Qatar Airways more opportunities to fly into Australia. That, of course, would mean more opportunities to fly overseas and, theoretically, cheaper tickets if it actually took place. Now, at the time, the Labor Party said they were helping Qantas's bottom line, and then they got a do-over and another do-over and another do-over, but we remember the sticky paper all of this was. At the time, the Fin said Qatar Airways was surprised by Labor's decision. Well, what about today in the Courier Mail? Ministers gifted Qantas upgrades after blocking rival airline. So many of the people who were sitting around the cabinet table, if this was discussed, well, look what they suddenly got rewarded with, which in and of itself I would suggest gets very close to the Ministerial Code of Conduct. 7 Labor ministers and assistant ministers were gifted complimentary flight upgrades from Qantas in the months after the Albanese government blocked the rival airline from expanding in Australia. Nothing to see here. The upgrades, which included international trips, are contained in the recent MP declarations of Mark Butler, Bill Shorten, Mark Dreyfus, Annika Wells, Pat Conroy, Matt Keogh and Andrew Giles. Again, they'll all say it's within the rules. But, of course, there's the pub test, which is completely different than the rules, and then there's the Ministerial Code of Conduct that only now people are pulled out of the drawer and are actually realising how often so many of the things that our, front of the plane class take for granted are direct contraventions of the very rules under which they are able to have their jobs. Unsurprisingly, Peter Dutton's more than happy to talk about this today, tomorrow and all the way into next week.
Well, certainly on the face of reading the Gillard government Ministerial Code of Conduct, the Prime Minister has breached that by his own admission.
And then you'll love this bit. As you know, whether or not this makes it, question time next week and then off to the National Corruption Commission, which is where Peter Dutton may well end up sending it.
I think it's a matter that should be referred by the Prime Minister. I think the Prime Minister should take the initiative to refer this matter to the Integrity Commission, because I think there are lots of questions about Mr Albanese's credibility and his integrity in relation to the Qatar decision.
Guess who's got the Qantas Chairman's Club treatment as well? The very people who run the National Anti-Corruption Commission. Again, great reporting today, Andrew Clennell.
Well, what about this? I mean, Peter Dutton, Kieran, he wants Anthony Albanese to refer himself to the National Anti-Corruption Commission over his flight upgrades and his relationship with Qantas. Turns out the people who'd be adjudicating on that themselves are members of the Chairman's Lounge. If Joe Aston's book didn't tell you this has reached into every section of the bureaucracy, society, politics and business in Australia, this little example does.
How does somebody who sits in judgment of other people about corruption put themselves in a position to accept the soft power of the biggest company in an area that is being administered by the government, the areas like the transport sector? And well done again to the Financial Review and one of their reporters who was able to work out, where are the Teals? You know, better standards in Parliament, all the rest of it, or are they just lining up for their own upgrades? And because they're not ministers, there's no such thing as a code of conduct. And, of course, they wouldn't go to the pub for a pub test. That's too beneath them. I mean, Aperol Spritz somewhere else.